My husband, Julian, sat across from me in our kitchen, casually scrolling through his phone while eating a steak that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. He didn't even look up when he said, "Oh, by the way, I sold your car today. The guy is coming to pick it up in an hour." I felt a cold shock run through my body. That car was a gift from my late father. It was the only thing I had left of him. My hands started to shake, so I hid them under the table. "You did what?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Julian finally looked up, flashing that arrogant smile he used whenever he thought he was being smart. It was a gas guzzler, babe. I put the money toward a down payment on a new jet ski for the lake house. You can just take the bus to work. It's better for the environment anyway. He went back to his steak as if he hadn't just dismantled my independence. He didn't ask. He didn't consult me. He just decided. I sat there in the silence watching him chew and realized that for 10 years I had been a passenger in my own life. This wasn't the first time Julian had treated my life like his personal playground. 3 months ago, I found out he had emptied our joint savings account to invest in a friend's failing nightclub. When I confronted him, he told me I was being emotionally unstable and that I didn't understand how high-level finance worked. I was a nurse. I worked 12-hour shifts on my feet, saving lives, while he spent his days networking at golf courses. He relied on my steady paycheck to cover the mortgage while he played the big shot entrepreneur with the money I earned. Every time I tried to stand up for myself, he would gaslight me, telling me that I should be grateful he was there to manage things for me. But selling my father's car was the final straw. It was the one line he shouldn't have crossed. As I sat there watching the clock tick toward the hour when my car would be gone forever, I made a silent vow. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to cry. I was going to stay perfectly calm, and I was going to make a decision that would change his life as much as he had changed mine. Before the story continues, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please share your city or country in the comments. It's always meaningful to see how far these stories travel. Also, some elements are fictionalized for storytelling purposes, but the reflections and lessons on standing up for your worth are very real. Now, let's get back to the moment everything changed. The buyer arrived at 2 p.m. He was a nice enough man, looking a bit embarrassed as he handed Julian a thick envelope of cash. Julian didn't even let me say goodbye to the vehicle. He just tossed the guy the keys and stuffed the money into his designer wallet. "See, now we have more room in the driveway for the jet ski," Julian said, patting my shoulder as the car pulled away. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and went inside. I went straight to the guest bedroom, which I had started using as a makeshift office. I pulled out a hidden laptop, one Julian didn't know I owned. I had been working on something in secret for months, ever since the savings account incident. I wasn't just a nurse, I was a woman with a plan. I had spent the last 90 days documenting every single cent Julian had borrowed or invested from our accounts. I had bank statements, forged signatures he had made on my behalf, and a trail of text messages where he admitted to using my credit score to take out personal loans without my knowledge. He thought I was the quiet wife who couldn't handle math. He didn't know that I had spent my lunch breaks at the hospital meeting with a forensic accountant named Mr. Sterling. Mr. Sterling was a sharp, older man who hated bullies. He had helped me map out the true extent of Julian's fraud. It was worse than I thought. Julian wasn't just a bad husband, he was a criminal. He had been funneling money into a holding company that was actually just a bank account in his mistress's name. Yes, I knew about her too. Her name was Amber, and she was the one Julian was planning to take to the lake house on the new jet ski bought with my father's car money. I watched the buyer's taillights disappear from the driveway and felt a strange sense of peace. The trap was set. That evening, Julian was in a celebratory mood. He ordered expensive champagne and told me we were going to a luxury dinner at the Crystal Oaks Bistro to celebrate his business success. I wore my best dress, the one he liked because it made me look like a trophy. Inside, I felt like a soldier going into battle. We sat at a corner table under a massive chandelier. Julian was talking loudly about his new investment strategies, ignoring the way the people at the nearby tables were looking at him. He ordered the most expensive items on the menu: oysters, Wagyu steak, and a bottle of wine that cost $400. I ordered a simple house salad. Oh, come on, babe. Live a little. Julian laughed, swirling his wine. I'm the one paying tonight. I looked at him and smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile that didn't reach my eyes. You're right, Julian. You've been paying for everything lately, haven't you? He didn't notice the edge in my voice. He was too busy looking at his own reflection in the window. He was so convinced of his own brilliance that he couldn't see the ground crumbling beneath his feet. Halfway through the dinner, Julian's phone buzzed. He looked at it and frowned. Work call, he lied. I knew it was Amber. He stepped away from the table to take the call, leaving his designer wallet sitting right there on the white tablecloth. I waited until he was out of sight. Then I reached into my purse and pulled out a small, legal-sized envelope. I tucked it deep into the pocket of his suit jacket hanging on the back of his chair. That envelope contained a gift for Julian. It was a summary of the forensic audit, a copy of the legal injunction freezing his holding company account, and a formal notice of divorce. I sat back and took a sip of my water. The waiter came by to check on us. Everything okay, ma'am? He asked. I nodded. Everything is perfect. In fact, I think the check is going to be a big surprise for my husband tonight. The waiter smiled politely and moved on. I watched Julian through the glass doors of the patio. He was laughing, probably telling Amber about his stupid wife and the new jet ski. He had no idea that in exactly 10 minutes, the waiter would be bringing more than just the bill. Julian returned to the table, looking smug. Sorry about that, babe. Big deals don't rest, even on a Friday night. He sat down and took a huge bite of his steak. So I was thinking, we should sell the house next month. Move into something bigger. Somewhere with a view of the city. I've already contacted a realtor. My heart hammered in my chest. He was trying to sell our home now. The home my mother had helped us buy. He was moving fast, trying to liquidate everything before I found out the truth. The house. I asked calmly. But we love this house, Julian. He waved his hand dismissively. It's an asset, Elena. And assets are meant to be traded for better ones. Trust me, I know what I'm doing. I looked at him and realized he truly saw me as an asset too. One that he was planning to trade in for a younger model once he had drained me dry. I felt a surge of rage, but I kept it locked down. I'm sure you do, Julian. You always have a plan. Just then, I saw the restaurant manager, a tall man named Mr. Brooks, walking toward our table with a very serious expression. Mr. Brooks didn't have a leather-bound checkbook in his hand. He had a manila folder. Behind him were two men in dark suits. Julian didn't notice them at first. He was too busy trying to catch the waiters to order another bottle of wine. Mr. Julian Vance? Mr. Brooks asked, his voice echoing in the quiet restaurant. Julian looked up, blinking. Yeah. What's this about? If it's about the wine, just put it on the tab. The two men in suits stepped forward. One of them pulled out a badge. I'm Detective Miller, and this is Detective Vance from the Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest regarding the embezzlement of funds from the St. Jude Nurses Pension Fund. The entire restaurant went silent. Julian's fork clattered onto his plate. What? That's impossible. There must be a mistake. He looked at me, his eyes wide with terror. Elena, tell them. Tell them it's a mistake. I didn't say anything. I just sat there, watching him. I took a slow sip of my water and looked at the detective. I believe you'll find the rest of the documentation in his jacket pocket, I said clearly. The detective reached into Julian's jacket and pulled out the envelope I had hidden there. As he opened it and scanned the forensic audit I had provided, Julian's face turned a ghostly shade of gray. He looked like he was about to vomit. This is a setup, Julian screamed, standing up so fast his chair flipped over. My wife is crazy. She's trying to ruin me. Detective Miller didn't flinch. He grabbed Julian's arm and spun him around, clicking a pair of cold, steel handcuffs onto his wrists. Mr. Vance, you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you. As they started to lead him away, the entire restaurant watched in stunned silence. Julian was sobbing now, the big shot businessman reduced to a shaking mess. He looked back at me one last time, his face twisted with hatred. How could you do this to me? I loved you. I stood up slowly and straightened my dress. You didn't love me, Julian. You loved my paycheck. You loved my credit score. And you loved making decisions for me. Well, I made one for you. Enjoy your new investment in a jail cell. After they dragged Julian out, the restaurant manager approached me. I am so sorry for the scene, Mrs. Vance. We had to cooperate with the authorities. I looked at the table, the half-eaten wagyu, the expensive wine, the ruin of a 10-year lie. It's okay, Mr. Brooks. Actually, I have one more thing to take care of. I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope of cash the man had given Julian for my father's car. I had taken it from his wallet while he was on the phone. I pulled out $400 and handed it to the manager. This should cover the salad and the wine Julian already drank. As for the rest of his meal, you can send the bill to his new address at the county jail. The manager looked at the money, then at me, and gave a small, respectful bow. Of course, ma'am. Would you like a car called for you? I smiled, a real one this time. No, thank you, Mr. Brooks. I think I'll walk. It's a beautiful night for a fresh start. I walked out of that restaurant with my head held high, leaving the ghost of Julian Vance behind me. The walk home was long, but I needed the air. My phone was blowing up with messages. Not from Julian, he was processed by now, but from Amber. Where is he? Why isn't he answering? We were supposed to meet. I stopped under a street lamp and finally replied. I sent her a photo of the holding company bank statement showing a balance of 0. I had legally reclaimed every cent that afternoon with the help of the court injunction. I added a short message. The jet ski has been canceled, and so has your lifestyle. Julian is in jail, and the account is empty. Find a new hobby. I blocked her number before she could reply. For years, I had been the failing one in the relationship because Julian told me I was. I was the one who didn't understand money. I was the one who was too emotional. But as I looked at the stars, I realized I was the strongest person I knew. I had worked double shifts while fighting a war at home, and I had won. When I got back to the house, it felt different. It didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a building made of bricks and wood that belonged to me. I went into the garage and saw the empty spot where my father's car used to be. My heart ached for a moment, but then I remembered the cash in my purse. Tomorrow, I would go to the man who bought it. I would offer him $500 more than he paid to get it back. I knew he would say yes. It was a good car, but the story behind it was worth more than the metal. I went into the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. For the first time in a decade, I didn't have to listen to Julian's loud voice complaining about the low-quality tea I bought. I didn't have to hear about his visionary ideas. The silence was the most beautiful thing I had ever heard. I sat in the dark, sipping my tea, and started making a list of all the things I was going to do now that I was the one in charge. The news of Julian's arrest hit the local papers 2 days later. Local businessman arrested in pension fraud scheme. The story detailed how he had used his position as a consultant to siphon money from the very nurses I worked with every day. When I walked into the hospital for my shift on Monday, the atmosphere was electric. My co-workers, women I had known for years, looked at me with a mix of shock and admiration. "Elena, is it true?" one of them asked. "Did he really take our retirement money?" I stood in the break room and told them everything. I told them how I found out, how I worked with the forensic accountant, and how I made sure the authorities had everything they needed to freeze the assets. "The money is being recovered," I told them. "It will take time, but Julian won't get to keep a single penny of what he took from us." They hugged me, some of them crying with relief. I wasn't just saving myself anymore. I was saving my community. The divorce was finalized faster than I expected. Julian tried to fight it from jail, but he had no leverage. The evidence of his holding company and his infidelity was so overwhelming that the judge granted me almost everything. I kept the house, my father's car, which I successfully bought back, and a significant portion of the recovered funds as restitution for the money he had stolen from our joint accounts. Julian was sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. He sent me a letter a month into his sentence, blaming me for destroying a family. He said I was cold and calculated. I read the letter twice. Then I used it to light a fire in my fireplace. He was right about one thing. I was calculated. I had to be. When you are being hunted by a predator, you have to become a strategist to survive. I watched the paper turn to ash and felt the last bit of weight lift off my shoulders. He was a memory now, and memories can't make decisions for you. 6 months later, I was sitting on my porch, watching the sunset. My father's car was parked in the driveway, gleaming after a fresh wax. I had used some of the money to fix the engine and the interior, restoring it to exactly how it looked when he first bought it. It was my victory car. I had also started a small nonprofit organization that helped women in financially abusive relationships. I used my experience to teach them how to spot the signs, how to protect their assets, and how to build a firewall around their lives. I wasn't the quiet nurse anymore. I was a leader. I was a survivor. And I was a woman who knew the value of a single, well-timed decision. I sometimes think back to that night at the Crystal Oaks Bistro. I think about the taste of the water and the sound of the handcuffs. People ask me if I regret being so cruel to him in public. I tell them the truth. Julian spent 10 years publicly and privately humiliating me by treating me like an object. He deserved a public reckoning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. You can't steal a person's life and expect them to say thank you for the crumbs you leave behind. I learned that silence isn't a sign of weakness. It's often the sound of a person gathering their strength. My husband made decisions that affected my life without asking, so I stayed calm and made one that changed the world he lived in. And I would do it all over again in a heartbeat. The recovery of the pension funds was a long process, but a year later, the first checks started arriving for the nurses. I remember the day the head of HR called me into her office. Elena, because of your forensic report, we were able to track down an additional $200,000 hidden in an offshore account we didn't even know existed. She handed me a commendation letter from the hospital board. I didn't want to meddle. I just wanted my friends to be able to retire in peace. That afternoon, we had a party in the break room. We ate sheet cake and drank lukewarm coffee, and it was the best meal I'd had in years. I realized that the luxury Julian had always chased was hollow. Real wealth is being able to look the people you work with in the eye and know you did right by them. I went home that night and felt a deep, soul-level exhaustion, but it was the good kind. The kind you get from building something, not from being torn down. My relationship with money changed forever. I no longer saw it as something to be managed by a man. I took classes on investing and wealth management. I realized that Julian had kept me in the dark because knowledge is power, and he wanted all of it. Now, I have my own accounts, my own investments, and a financial plan that ensures I will never be vulnerable again. I look at my bank statements every week, not out of fear, but out of a sense of ownership. I am the CEO of my own life. I even bought a small piece of land near the lake, not for a jet ski, but for a cabin where I can go to write and think. I named it the Silence. It's a reminder that the most powerful thing you can do is listen to your own intuition. I haven't dated much since the divorce. People tell me I should get back out there, but I'm enjoying my own company too much. I like the way the house smells of lavender and old books. I like the way I can leave a dish in the sink if I'm tired and not hear a lecture about domestic standards. I'm learning who Elena is without the shadow of a man blocking the sun. I've started painting again, something I gave up when Julian told me it was a waste of time. My paintings aren't for sale, they are for me. They are colorful, messy, and full of life. Just like I am. I realized that Julian didn't just steal my money, he tried to steal my color. But you can't keep a bright soul in the dark forever. A few weeks ago, I ran into Amber at a grocery store. She looked tired. The expensive hair and designer clothes were gone, replaced by a cheap tracksuit and a look of desperation. She tried to avoid my gaze, but I walked right up to her. I didn't say anything mean. I didn't gloat. I just looked at her and said, "I hope you're doing better now that you're not living on stolen money." She looked at me with a mix of shame and anger. "He told me you were the one who stole from him," she whispered. I almost laughed. Of course he did. That was his specialty, flipping the script. But the truth doesn't need a script. I walked away feeling a strange sense of closure. She was just another victim of his manipulation, even if she was a willing participant for a while. I recently received a letter from the prison. It wasn't from Julian this time. It was a formal notification that his request for early parole had been denied. The board cited the calculating and predatory nature of his crimes and his lack of remorse. I put the letter in a file folder marked closed. I don't wish him ill, but I believe in the law of gravity. What you throw out into the world eventually comes back to hit you. Julian threw out a lot of pain, and now he's living in the middle of it. I, on the other hand, am living in the middle of the peace I fought so hard for. I took a deep breath and looked out the window. The garden I planted last spring was finally in full bloom. People ask me if I'm lonely. I tell them that I was never lonelier than when I was sitting across the dinner table from a man who didn't see me. True loneliness is being in a marriage where your voice doesn't matter. Being alone is a luxury I worked hard to afford. I have my friends, my work, and my father's car. Sometimes, on Sunday mornings, I drive out to the coast. I roll down the windows and let the salt air fill the car. I think about my dad and how he would have been proud of me, not for being a good wife, but for being a strong woman. He always told me that a car is a tool for freedom. I finally understand what he meant. I've started speaking at conferences now, sharing my story with nurses and healthcare workers across the country. I tell them about the hidden signs of financial abuse. I tell them that it doesn't always start with a stolen car. It starts with a "I'll handle the bills, honey." It starts with "you don't need to see the bank statements." I see the looks on their faces, the shock of recognition. If I can save one person from the decade of darkness I went through, then every tear I cried was worth it. I am no longer a victim. I am an advocate. I am a voice for the silent. And my voice is getting louder every day. My life is quiet now, but it's a full quiet. I have a sense of purpose that I never had when I was living for Julian's approval. I realize that the golden child trap is real. We are taught to be perfect, to be quiet, and to be helpful, even to our own detriment. But perfection is a cage. I'd rather be difficult and free than perfect and trapped. I'm okay with people thinking I'm too much. I spent too long being not enough. I look at the house, the car, and the life I've built, and I know that I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. As I finish writing this, I'm sitting on my lake house porch. The water is still, reflecting the first stars of the evening. Julian is 1,000 miles away behind iron bars. The nurses have their pensions. I have my father's car. And most importantly, I have my dignity. My husband made decisions that affected my life without asking, and for a long time, I let him. But I stayed calm, I gathered my strength, and I made one decision that affected his life forever. It was the best decision I ever made. The story of the quiet wife is over. The story of Elena has just begun. And this time, I'm the one holding the keys. I'm the one driving, and I'm never looking back.